Nigh.
Imagine a massive citywide tornado siren just going
Oh,
off.
yeah. That sound, it gets right into your bones.
Right. It's deafening, it's terrifying, and it instantly disrupts your entire life. I mean, your heart races, your plans are ruined, and you are basically forced to drop everything.
You can't ignore it. That's the whole point.
Exactly. But here is the thing about that siren, right? The noise itself isn't meant to destroy your town.
No, not at all.
It's actually designed to force you into the basement so you survive the storm that is, about to hit. And today, we are looking at an ancient text that treats the end of the world exactly like that siren.
It's really a brilliant way to frame it, because when most people read apocalyptic literature, they just hear the deafening noise, they see all the chaos, and they completely miss the intention behind it.
Yeah, they just see the panic. Anyway, welcome to another deep dive. For a curious learner like you, the Bible's book of Revelation can feel like a chaotic storm of ink on a page.
Oh, absolutely. It's overwhelming.
You've got multi-headed beasts, falling stars, bottomless pits, global earthquakes. It is the absolute definition of overwhelming information. But our mission today is to take that chaos and really chart out the architectural map of its famous 7-year tribulation period.
Right. Getting into the actual mechanics of it.
Exactly. We're going to look strictly at the mechanics, how the massive judgments, which are known as the seals, the trumpets, and the bowls, how they're structured, how they escalate, and what exactly happens at this critical 3.5-year midpoint that just flips the world upside down.
And, I think it's important to lay some ground rules right up front for how we are approaching this, because people have spent literally 2,000 years arguing over how to read this text.
Oh, yeah. A lot of very heated debates.
For sure. Some think it's a history lesson of the distant past. Some think it's a strict, literal prophecy of our future.
Yeah.
And then others read it purely as, like, a grand spiritual metaphor.
Right. And we aren't here to take a side in those theological or political debates. For this deep dive, we are focusing impartially on the internal logic of the text itself. We are looking at the chronological layout exactly as the source texts map it out. We're conveying the mechanical structure without endorsing any specific religious or political stance. We are basically just looking at the blueprint.
Just the mechanics, yeah.
Okay, let's unpack this.
So if we are looking at this as a blueprint, before we can plot any specific events on a timeline, we have to understand how to actually read the map. Because when you sit down and just read Revelation straight through, you immediately run into a massive structural puzzle.
You really do. I mean, you start noticing these striking, almost repetitive similarities that make you question if you accidentally reread a chapter.
Yes, the repetition is wild.
Like, for example, in chapter 8, a burning mountain is thrown into the sea and a third of the sea turns to blood. But then if you fast forward a few chapters to chapter 16, a bowl of wrath is poured out and the sea turns to blood again. It's like, are we just stuck in a loop here?
And that is exactly the question that has divided scholars for centuries. That repetition leads to a concept called parallelism or recapitulation.
Recapitulation.
Yeah. And if you subscribe to this view, you believe that these 3 major series of judgments, the seals, the trumpets, and the bowls, aren't happening one after another in a long sequential line. Instead, they're the exact same story told 3 different times.
I like to think of it like looking at different sides of the same building. You walk around it, so you see the front, then you see the side, then you see the back. The angle changes, maybe the lighting changes, but it's always the same building.
Precisely. That's a great way to picture it. But there's a very different framework that we're focusing on today from the sources, which is the telescopic or nested chronology.
Nested.
In this sequential view, these judgments are not parallel loops. They are physically nested within each other, moving the timeline strictly forward.
So I was trying to visualize this when prepping for today, and the best analogy I could come up with is a set of Russian nesting dolls. You open the first doll, then the second, the third, all the way to the 7th. But when you crack open that final 7th doll...
A whole new set pops out.
Exactly. A whole new set of 7 smaller dolls pops right out.
It's a really helpful visual for the structure, but we actually need to push that analogy a bit further to understand the mechanics. It's not just a set of static wooden dolls. It's more like they are rigged with clockwork and tripwires.
Okay, wait, explain that, because this is actually where I wanted to push back a little.
Yeah.
If we aren't just repeating the story, if this is all happening in a straight sequential line, doesn't this view mean things just drag on forever?
How do you mean?
Like, how does the seventh seal lead directly into a whole new series of trumpets without the narrative just feeling like an endless, exhausting list of bad things happening?
Well, what's fascinating here is the precise mechanism the text uses to link them. The seventh seal doesn't describe the end of the world. The seventh seal actually is the trigger for the seven trumpets.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, when that final seal is broken, it doesn't unleash its own independent disaster. Rather, breaking it acts as a mechanism that initiates the next phase. The seal cracks, and out come the trumpets. And later, when the seventh trumpet sounds, it expands to contain the seven bowls.
Ah, okay. So opening the seventh seal trips the wire for the trumpets. It's an expanding, progressive development. So it's not a repetition and it's not a random list. It's a highly structured cascade of events.
Exactly. It creates a forward momentum. The narrative is constantly telescoping outward into greater detail and much higher intensity.
Okay, so if we agree that these judgments are nested inside each other, like, rigged clockwork, a massive logistical problem pops up. How do you fit all 21 of these escalating global catastrophes? So 7 seals, 7 trumpets, 7 bowls into a strict 7-year calendar without them overlapping into just pure chaos. This kind of brings us to the actual timeline and its dramatic turning point.
Right. And to understand this 7-year window, you actually have to flip backward in the biblical text to the book of Daniel.
The Old Testament, yeah.
Yes. Daniel lays the foundational math for this period, which is often called the tribulation. But the character of this time is best described by a term Jesus actually used in his teachings, which is birth pangs.
Birth pangs, right. And the 7-year period officially kicks off with a treaty, basically a false peace, which leads us to the first half of the timeline where we see the first 4 seals opened. These are the famous 4 horsemen of the apocalypse.
Oh, yeah. Very famous imagery.
And reading through them, you can see a terrifyingly logical progression of societal collapse.
Walk us through how they connect, actually.
Yeah. Well, the white horse rides out first, and the sources say it represents conquest and false messiahs. So someone coming in promising to fix everything.
A deceptive peace.
Exactly. But that false peace shatters, triggering the red horse, which takes peace from the earth and brings international bloody war.
And logically, what follows widespread global war.
The collapse of supply chains, the black horse, famine. I mean, the text gives this chilling detail where a voice says, a quart of wheat for a denarius.
Which is astronomical inflation.
Right. In the ancient world, a denarius was an entire day's wage. So you were working a full day of hard labor just to buy a single loaf of bread to survive. And finally, because of the war and the famine, you naturally get the pale horse, which is pestilence, disease, and mass death.
It's just brutal domino effect. But as severe as the 4 horsemen are, they correlate perfectly with that idea of the beginning of birth pangs. They are entirely human-driven catastrophes.
Empires rising, nations fighting, resources dwindling.
Exactly. It is terrible. But it is only the beginning. The real catastrophic shift happens exactly at the 3.5-year mark.
The midpoint pivot. The text outlines this incredible turning point, where the Antichrist figure suddenly breaks that 7-year peace treaty he made with Israel. He enters the sacred temple space, desecrates it, an act the sources famously call the abomination of desolation, and fundamentally demands to be worshipped as a god.
This is the ultimate catalyst. It shifts the persecution into high gear and really triggers the rapid escalation of all the remaining judgments.
Okay, but I need to stop you here because I spent a lot of time looking at this timeline, and honestly, the math seems completely broken to me.
Really? How so?
Look at the distribution. If those first 4 seals, the horsemen, take up the first 3.5 years of the timeline, and the 6th seal roughly correlates with this midpoint desecration of the temple, well, that leaves the entire 7th seal for the second half. And remember, our clockwork nesting dolls. That 7th seal contains all 7 trumpets and all 7 bowls. You are telling me we have 4 extended events in the first 3.5 years, and then 14 massive supernatural global events squeezed into the final 3.5 years. That is an incredibly top-heavy timeline. It just doesn't seem like it fits.
You know, you are absolutely right that it is top-heavy. It is entirely unbalanced, and that is exactly the point.
Wait, really?
Yes, this is why that birth pangs analogy is so vital to understand the mechanics of this timeline. Think about actual human labor. Birth pangs do not happen evenly spaced out, once a month, for 9 months.
Right, they start slow, maybe hours apart.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And as the birth actually approaches, what happens to the contractions? They compress, they intensify in frequency, happening faster and faster, and they dramatically intensify in pain right at the very end. The timeline isn't supposed to be a perfectly balanced metronome.
Oh.
The final 3.5 years are intensely, purposefully compressed to simulate the final agonizing moments before something entirely new is born.
Wow. Okay, that entirely reframes it for me. It's a compression of contractions. So, recognizing that the second 3.5 years are vastly more intense and rapid, we really need to look at exactly how the severity ramps up. Because it's one thing to say, things get worse, but the text details a very specific mechanical shift when that seventh seal trips the wire and unleashes the trumpets.
Right. The trumpet judgments introduce a completely new level of catastrophe.
Hmm.
We are moving away from human-driven wars or natural famines. These are entirely supernatural disasters.
Burning mountains falling from the sky, demonic entities.
Exactly. But amid all this horror, there was a very specific limitation placed on them.
Yeah, I noticed this, and it was such a weird recurring math problem. Over and over, the text says 1/3. 1/3 of the Earth's flora is burned up. 1/3 of the sea turns to blood. 1/3 of the celestial light is darkened. Why this sudden obsession with fractions? I mean, why would an all-powerful judgment only do 33% of the job?
Because it isn't just a judgment of destruction, it is a judgment of delay. Yes. The fractions represent a built-in holding pattern. By only striking 1/3 and leaving 2/3 intact, the text is revealing the underlying psychology of these events. It is designed to inspire repentance.
Oh, which brings us back to my tornado siren analogy.
Exactly. A tornado siren is disruptive and terrifying, sure, but its entire purpose is to warn you to seek shelter before the actual untethered destruction arrives.
But the sirens in this text are terrifying on a scale that is just hard to comprehend. We're not just talking about loud noises. Like, the fifth trumpet releases locusts from a bottomless pit that torment people for 5 months, but they specifically aren't allowed to kill them.
Right.
And the sixth trumpet releases a 200 million strong supernatural cavalry. I mean, it is pure nightmare fuel.
It is absolute nightmare fuel.
Yeah.
But theoretically, it functions as a severe mercy. God is essentially hitting the earth with a supernatural crowbar to wake humanity up, but actively holding back total annihilation to give them a chance to change their minds.
Which is such an important lens for you, the listener, to view this through. When you look at this chronological structure, it functions not just as a calendar of doom. It is an intricately designed narrative of escalating warnings. The architecture of the timeline is built around giving humanity every possible off-ramp before the end.
Beautifully said.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though, because those off-ramps eventually run out. The window of warning doesn't stay open forever.
No, it doesn't. Eventually, the contractions reach their absolute peak, bringing us to the final nested layer.
The sirens have sounded, the warnings were largely ignored, and the timeline reaches its absolute breaking point. The seventh trumpet sounds. And remember, it's a tripwire. It doesn't just make a noise. It pours out the 7 bowls or vials of ultimate wrath.
And the contrast in scope between the trumpets and the bowls is staggering. Remember that fractional mercy we just talked about?
Yeah.
The 1/3 limitation?
Yeah.
That is entirely gone.
It's completely erased. Like in the second bowl, which is poured on the sea, the text explicitly says the sea turns entirely to blood, described like the blood of a dead person. Every single living thing in the sea dies. I mean, imagine the immediate collapse of all global maritime trade, the loss of major food sources for coastal populations. It is total, unmitigated, systemic failure.
And it continues with unrelenting speed, too. A massive heat wave scorches humanity. The kingdom of the beast is plunged into an agonizing total darkness. And then the Euphrates River dries up completely.
Okay, let's pause on the Euphrates for a second, because to a modern reader, a river drying up sounds bad, but maybe not world-ending. Why is that specific geographical detail so important in the context of these judgments?
Well, if you are reading this in the 1st century, the Euphrates River wasn't just a body of water. It was the eastern boundary of the known Roman world.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was the massive natural barrier that protected civilization from the terrifying, unconquered empires of the East. So, drying up the Euphrates isn't just an ecological disaster. It literally removes the final barrier holding back global chaotic war. It paves the way for the kings of the East to march toward the climax.
removing the very edge of civilization. And it all culminates in the final seventh bowl, which brings a worldwide earthquake so severe that it levels every mountain and sinks every island, accompanied by 100-pound hailstones. It's a complete physical reshaping of the planet Earth.
It really is a geological reset. But the most significant shift here isn't just physical, it's thematic. The trumpets, as severe as they were, offered a possibility of redemption. The bowls absolutely do not.
It is the complete end of grace.
Yes. The text makes it clear that the bowl judgments are a direct, unmitigated assault on those who have willingly taken the mark of the beast. These are populations that have witnessed the supernatural warnings of the trumpets and still actively harden their hearts.
They made their choice.
Exactly. They are deemed entirely unrepentant. The time for warning sirens has passed. This phase is purely about resolution and final justice.
And that seventh bowl leads directly into the grand finale. The timeline shows that this final geological reset triggers the climax of the entire 7-year period. The kings of the earth gather for the ultimate conflict at Armageddon, the great symbolic system of Babylon falls, and immediately after this, we see the second advent, the return of Christ.
Riding a white horse, completely defeating the beast and his armies. Not with a protracted war, but instantly.
And establishing a 1,000-year era of peace known as the Millennial Kingdom. The agonizing, compressed contractions of the judgments finally give birth to a millennium of perfect order.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we see a flawlessly architected chronological cascade. The seals open the scroll, revealing the initial human-driven birth pangs of war and famine. That seventh seal cracks open into the trumpet warnings, which are supernatural, but limited to 1/3, actively pleading for humanity to turn back. And finally, when those warnings are rejected, that seventh trumpet spills over into the bowl judgments, bringing total global finality.
It really is a masterclass in narrative tension and nested timelines. I mean, we moved from the general hoofbeats of the horsemen, hit that massive acceleration at the 3.5-year pivot where the temple is desecrated, expanded into the fractional tornado sirens of the trumpets, and culminated in the total finality of the bowls.
It's the ultimate realization of the birth pangs metaphor. The pressure builds, the contractions compress, until the old, corrupted world gives way entirely to the new.
So, what does this all mean for you listening right now? Understanding the sequential telescopic layout helps you read this ancient apocalyptic text not as a jumbled random nightmare, but as a highly structured progressive vision of history. It takes the sea monsters out of the margins and shows you the underlying grid.
It really forces us to look at this magnificent, terrifying blueprint, not just as a future schematic, but as a visceral historical document of unimaginable present crisis.
The map just keeps unfolding the longer you stare at it. Thank you for joining us on this journey. We hope the next time you encounter apocalyptic imagery, you won't just hear the chaotic noise of the siren. You'll see the architecture of the warning. Until next time, keep exploring the blueprint.